Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, my homeowner association sued us for having a baby in a so-called seniors-only community. They demand we remove our infant from our home. Here is what happened. Subscribe to Ripe on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. Hey there, I will start by introducing myself before I get into the gritty details. I am Harris and together with my wife Sarah. We moved into this little HOA neighborhood roughly 2 years ago. A little while after we had finished unpacking, we got a newsletter saying that the local community had gotten together and asked the HOA to make a new rule to turn this area in an adults-only space, with residents now needing to be 55 years or older before being allowed into the neighborhood. I found it a bit strange, but at the time we did not think it would be a problem, because we moved in before the rule, so we thought we were generously allowed to stay. We have recently had a daughter and our family has grown. I cannot remember if we remembered the age rule or just did not think that they would be pedantic about it, but oh boy, were we wrong. Shortly after we announced the new baby to the neighborhood, we were sent 2 letters marked as urgent. One was from the HOA and another was from their attorney, which was another red flag to outline how serious and stupid this was. Both letters were the same. Each read, "As of September 26th, this neighborhood has elected to become a seniors-only community. And it has come to our attention that your house has broken that rule. As such, we kindly advise you to remove the infant from your home ASAP. We understand and apologize for any inconvenience." I stood by my mailbox dumbfounded as I read and reread the letter over and over again until Sarah came out to see what was going on. With the urgency they asked for, instead we wrote back a letter stating all the reasons we were not going to evict our baby and where they could stick their future requests for us to do so. The following week, after a tense silence, we got a new letter from their attorney to say we were being sued by the HOA for breaking their neighborhood rules. Knowing that the more eyes on this case the better, we petitioned to our neighbors for support and being pleasantly surprised to find that this new policy was not exactly unanimous. Mainly families like us opposed the rule, while even some older couples also did not agree with it. Over the next few weeks, as the court trial loomed closer, my wife and I attended a number of neighborhood meetings with the HOA to try and talk through our differences. Each time being met with disdain and disagreement. Even when we brought supporters with us, it made no difference to the board. When discussion didn't work, I instead pinned flyers on the street corners to advise our struggle and warn the would-be opposition against very costly legal fees. Finally, that seemed to get the attention of the big shot HOA president, Carter himself. He had gone thus far in avoiding the situation by delegating it to the board members or stating he is busy elsewhere. But luckily for us that the mention of legal fees seemed to have finally lit a fire under him. As the news had caught on to the story, Carter made a public statement to face the allegations against the HOA. "All they are doing here is scaring the good folks of this neighborhood. I don't even know why they want to bring up a child here anyhow. Most residents moved here to get away from kids. That's the point of the age restriction rule. We are all too old to be dealing with that." After reading up and researching to a great extent on the HOA and its rules, I found that in order to properly make their rule official, they needed written permission from every bank or lender that is associated to the homes within the neighborhood. In other words, every family that has a pre-existing mortgage agreement. And while the HOA board members apparently did send many letters to each of these banks, not all of them replied, which put them in a real sticky position, as despite their arguments, it meant they had no power on the matter, but that did not stop them from barking nonetheless. In what looked like another desperate attempt for support from the HOA, one of their attorneys appealed to the public, calling our lawsuit a ridiculous technicality and claimed that we were painting them unjustly as the bad guys when all the citizens here wanted to do was to be able to decide on their own where and how they wanted to live. As the threat of court was on the verge of tearing our community apart, it was raised that the HOA under no circumstances has the power to discriminate its citizens based on race, gender or religion. Frickin' somehow young people were exempt from protection, and this was actually an allowed thing to do. That was of course if they met a very specific set of rules and regulations first, which we knew when we challenged the HOA they were gonna do their best to meet and show us up, as otherwise they would be likely to lose thousands in damages and overall fees. Despite the fight going well, a number of my neighbors started to get cold feet when they were sent flyers detailing a similar case a few years ago, with all 20 homeowners of the original lawsuit being forced to pay out almost $10,000 each in drawn-out legal fees and damages, afraid that this could happen again. As I urged my neighbors to stay strong, we ended up getting support from a very unusual source: Sandra, former secretary of the HOA board of directors. In a statement to the press, Sandra showed genuine public sympathy with our case, which in turn caused her to be fired under the alluring guise of a quiet resignation. I never would have moved here if I knew what was going on. The more I thought about it all, the more I thought, this really cannot be happening. We cannot do this to our homeowners. But even Sandra after that wanted to distance her from the case, not wishing to be drawn into a legal battle. She quoted, "Could get very costly," while disheartened from her disappearance. It did help to gather more public support from other HOA neighborhoods across the Tri-County area who flocked to social media to help out. As the weekly HOA neighborhood meetings continued, with varied attendance between the long sessions of heated bickering, more neighbors got angry about our plight and joined in with their own lawsuits, to the point that Carter, the HOA president, started cutting the meetings short when his temper started getting the better of him. I was not there personally for the last meeting, but word on the grapevine is that he was redder than a hot tomato. With diplomacy well and truly effed at that point, both sides had no choice but to fight it out in court. The proceedings lasted for months as their team of expert attorneys attempted to beat us to a war of attrition, but with the large number of lawsuits we had gathered, plus the crowds of public support that came to the trials, we managed to keep heart and stuck through it to the end. Nearly a year after the whole mess started, the judge and jury had come to their decision. The local HOA was found guilty of breaking the law and breaching their own rules of conduct and ordered to pay out an immense sum in damages to myself and the other homeowners. The HOA president quit the next day and sold their house. The last words we heard from the old grump were, "No way in hell am I going to be living in a neighborhood with a kid." But we happily waved him off as we made good with our celebrations. The board members also got changed up a bit, and we have worked well with their replacements ever since. We are coming up now to Amber's 3rd birthday and we still love this house. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I'm curious what you think about this story. Let us know in the comments if you think OP was in the right or in the wrong. However, I gotta say, if I would be in OP's shoes, I'm not so sure if I would feel happy in this kind of neighborhood. Although it did seem like a lot of the neighbors actually supported OP. Either way, let's continue with the next stories. My neighbor who took me to court because of noise my cat made. This happened about 4 years ago now and still is one of the more ridiculous things to happen to me. I was living in San Diego, CA at the time in a small apartment building with 7 or 8 units. I lived on the 2nd floor. Our building was right near the highway overpass on the outskirts of downtown. We were also very close to the airport flight path, which made our neighborhood pretty loud. At this point I had already lived in my apartment for just over 3 years. I decided to get a cat, got the permission from my landlord and paid a pet deposit. When I got her through a shelter, she was probably about 3 months old. One night I was watching TV when there was a knock at my door. I answered, and standing on my porch were 2 police officers, both with their hands on their weapons, both seemingly tense. They told me they had a noise complaint from my downstairs neighbor and that he thought I was on drugs and rolling a bowling ball around. It took me a few seconds to understand what they were talking about, and then I laughed. Oh, that's probably just my kitten running around. They were not amused. They told me if they had to come back, they would have to do something, which is a pretty wild threat after finding out the noise was from a cat. I left a message with my landlord to let them know what had happened. The next day, my downstairs neighbor came to my door to apologize to me. He said he thought I may have been making or selling drugs because his Army intelligence friends told him that those noises he heard align with drug activity. That made zero sense to me, but I came to realize this guy was not all there. He said he was sorry and was happy I had a cat and that he even had a toy he would give me. Cool, problem solved, right? About 2 weeks later, I had police at my door again. This time they were aware of the situation and we all chuckled about how absurd the situation was. However, since they were called, they had to come. They just told me I'm doing nothing wrong, don't worry about a thing. Right around this time, my neighbor began hitting his ceiling anytime my cat ran around. It got me anxious to the point of having my cat sleep in a separate smaller room so she could not run around. This only lasted a couple nights since she would cry the whole time. I just thought, whatever, I'm doing nothing illegal, we live in a city in a loud area, it's an apartment, etc. I am not sure of the exact timeline, but about a week later I had police at my door again. This time it was the San Diego County Sheriff with a damn court summons. This old douchebag neighbor was trying to get a restraining order against me and was claiming elder abuse. Yes, because of the noise of a now 6-month-old cat. Court date comes around and I had printed up about 15 to 20 pictures of my cat to show the judge. I was furious. My neighbor's evidence was handed to me, which was basically a list of dates and times that he marked down when he heard noises from my apartment. It is legit insane and 5 pages long and I still have it. The judge did not want to hear any of it, just forced us to enter into court-appointed mediation. I am fine with that, I just want things to improve. I received a call a few weeks after our court date to let me know that the neighbor refused mediation and that we would have a second court date towards the end of the month. Throughout all this time he was banging on the ceiling and scaring my cat. He started being malicious and would just whack the ceiling in the middle of the night, oftentimes waking me and causing my cat to go crazy and run around. Finally, the second court date was here and at this point I had already decided I would be leaving San Diego. It had nothing to do with this ongoing situation, but it was a light at the end of the tunnel for sure. We are in court and the judge starts yelling at my neighbor for refusing mediation and wasting the state's money. I interrupted to say, I just want to make sure everyone knows this is about noise my 6-month-old cat is making. I hear laughter from other people behind me in the courtroom. The neighbor pleads his case, says I am harassing him and making too much noise. I repeat, this is about noise my 6-month-old cat is making. The judge is clearly annoyed that this old man is wasting the court's time and said that we must enter mediation. I tell him, I'm sorry, we shouldn't even be here. I'm moving out of state in just a few weeks and again, this is about the noise a cat is making. Again, more chuckles from the courtroom. To this, the judge replies, oh well, if you don't end up moving, then you will need to come back to court. I said okay and was ready to be done with all this BS. My neighbor tried to have pleasantries with me at that point, but I just ignored him and walked out. I wish there was some sweet revenge at the end, but really, I never spoke to him again and my cat and I are living happily in an apartment where she can run around to her heart's desire and no one can tell her otherwise. Edit, my landlord did nothing to help me out, just chuckled and said, oh yeah, he's a character. And by the way, Ripe stars, JB and me are thinking about getting a cat in the future because I gotta be honest guys, I really miss having a cat. And we are currently thinking about which type of cat we should get. If it would be just me deciding, I would probably go to a, I don't know what you call it, cat orphanage or something, and get one of these cute black Thai cats often referred to as temple cats here. However, I do understand in Thai culture often these cats are associated with bad luck, so JB maybe wants a different one. She really likes the American short-hair ones and personally, if you really buy an expensive cat, I would probably get something like a Bengal cat because they look really amazing. What are your favorite cats? Do you have any good recommendations? Let us know in the comments. And the next one is titled, Crazy Neighbor Insists We Mow Her Lawn Too. This happened just 2 days ago. My husband and I live on over an acre of property and we try to regularly mow the lawn, but sometimes it does get a little bit too tall. The time before last time it did get a little overgrown and we ended up mowing a part of the neighbor's yard as we are not separated by a fence and we went over the property line a little bit. The neighbors on our left are complete jerks. We can hear them screaming at one another at least once a week, if not more, and the cops being called on one another at least twice a month. We keep our distance and try not to interact with them as much as possible, although we usually get shouted at when we are with our dogs in our backyard. We fenced off a small section for out pups, and more often than not we cannot even make out what they are shouting because they are so drunk. Anyway, after going over their property, we are interrupted by a pounding on our front door. Apparently, mowing part of her lawn made her property look terrible. Honestly, it didn't. It was a straight line down one side, so it just looked like we had more property. She was screaming at my husband, who told her to speak calmly or leave. She calmed down a little and somehow convinced him to mow the front of her property for free since he went over the property line. He was ready to mow at about 8 AM as he's not a late sleeper and gets most things finished early in the day. He began to mow, but this lady came out screaming at him about doing it so early. Apparently she was sleeping and the mowing woke her up. She insisted he come back, but not until at least 1 PM. I assume she was hungover, but would be well and drunk again by that time. My husband refused. He was already being overly nice by mowing her lawn, but either she let him do it now, but he would not be coming back later. She screamed at him to get lost, so he did exactly that. Of course, she was banging on our door again at 1:30 PM drunk as hell, and slurring curses at me and my husband about not keeping our promise. We did not promise her anything though. And when the job was being done, she told my husband to get lost. He just looked at her annoyed and told her the same thing. Get lost, lady! I tried to do you a favor. I didn't even have to mow your lawn at all, but I was trying to be nice. But you practically threw it in my face. I'm not your personal lawnmower, and now get off my property or it will be me who is calling the cops for once. I was so proud of him as he is a non-confrontational person, and it takes a lot for him to scream at a woman because he was brought up that you never raise your voice to a lady, but this woman was not a lady and I'm glad she left us alone. So far so good. She has not darkened our doorstep again, even though my husband refuses to try again to mow her lawn, not wanting to start something again. Side note, her drinking is not an assumption. I have literally seen her on her front porch killing a bottle or a box of wine in less than an hour, and it is usually around 11 AM too. The same time I take my dogs outside, I see this type of thing daily and repeatedly through the day. I could swear she probably drinks 3 to 4 bottles a day. Her husband does the same thing, but it is usually a bottle of Jack Daniels or some other whiskey, and we know for a fact her son, that lives with them, is on some kind of hardcore drugs because their husband once spoke to us once, by a miracle he was sober, and for some reason told us all about his screwed up son, because he fried his brain with drugs and spends all his money on more drugs. Apparently a lot of the yelling is the wife and son, and the cop calling is between the two of them calling the cops on each other. I bet the station knows their address by heart because of all the domestic dispute complaints. Thankfully, we have never seen an ambulance or fire trucks, just cops. And honestly guys, as horrible as these neighbors might be, I feel kind of bad for the son because obviously a kid that is being brought up under these circumstances cannot really turn out good, or at least the chance is very, very small. Have you ever had such, let's say, interesting neighbors? Let us know in the comments. Oh, and by the way, another thing I forgot to mention. I recently checked my statistics and it seems that around 30% of my viewers are subscribed and 70% are not subscribed. Let's just say this is pretty normal for Reddit channels, but I would really appreciate if we could get the subscribed viewers number up a little bit. So in general, it would make me really happy if you could subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much in advance. Anyway, the next story is titled, I did to my neighbor what they did to others. To start, I bought a house with the intention of doing a flip. When I moved in, the self-appointed block captain let me know who they were the first day. Sadly, they were my next door neighbors. I tried to be friendly, but listening to them I realized how horrible they were, but still tried to be civil. My significant other kept saying, just wait for it to be our turn. They bragged about, through their contacts with the city, forcing people to make improvements on their houses, getting undesirable renters out of their houses, and just harassing people in general. As I worked on flipping my house, the wife became a worse thorn in my side. To start, she demanded I put up a fence so people would quit cutting through my yard and scaring her. Then her and the husband demanded I take care of the weeds in the yard or they will do it and bill me. After that, because of a storm, a tree scraped their shingles and they asked for $1,200 to replace them. The tree was there before I moved in, and by co-ed they are responsible to cut back the branches to the property line. When I would not pay, they had a relative jump my fence and cut the trees down. Needless to say, I began to ignore them, so she became a constant gnat and moved on to another target. Then one day, as I was tearing down my deck for a patio, I realized she put a feral cat colony on a section of my property. I had wondered why all the stray cats were around, and I finally found out. I reached out to the city and demanded it to be removed, but they said she followed the law on getting it in place. As I tried to get it shut down, she began unhinged behavior, from standing in her window staring at me, yelling out the window at me, to hitting the fence with items to scare my dog. Here is where my revenge started. I started by filing an HRO/harassment restraining order against the wife and had it granted ex parte with the evidence I provided. Of course, she contested it as it was defamatory to her character. Before the hearing, the husband tried to physically intimidate me. So I filed one against him and it was also granted ex parte. In the hearing it came up that there was an HRO against the husband as well, and they docked being served until I had it published as a means of service. I started to make complaints about them and their house. Also, I made police calls when necessary. As I did this, the other neighbors began to realize they could do to them what they had done to them and others. For example, as I was having my front door replaced, needing a building work permit, I knew they were doing internal remodeling, so I called a city inspector and they were fined for not having a permit. As she ranted at the inspector, he looked at my window and saw I had mine displayed. Their back porch became hoarded, so I made another call to a city inspector and they had to clear it out. Then they had a broken window on the porch door, so I called an inspector and they had to replace the door. Next, the paint on their house was peeling, so I called an inspector and they had to repaint. The inspector also found the wood underneath was rotten, along with their front porch was sloping. So they needed to fix the front porch, sections of wood and repaint. Throughout all of this, they had cameras up to prove they were not doing the things I said they did, hitting the fence for example. They also pointed a camera at my backyard. As it was legal to point a camera into my yard and a part of my HRO was her intrusive watching behaviors, I gave the camera the middle finger on my way to and from my garage. When she complained with the city tiring of her, their response was she was admitting to intrusively watching me. The fight over the cat colony came to an end when I realized one of the cats had a serious disease and I began to capture them and turn them into animal control. Don't worry, animal control was part of the feral cat program, so they would not be put down, but the neighbor would have to pay a fine to get each cat out or have the colony closed. Finally, I caught the sick one and it had rabies. Part of the program was for her to capture each new cat, have it vaccinated. Something she admitted to willing not doing on her GoFundMe for the colony. I soon had the GoFundMe shut down when I provided the evidence she was not using the funds as she stated they were going to be used. The city now had to act to close the colony. The person at Animal Control who wouldn't respond to my complaints was fired. The neighbors called in a city mediator who we met with, presented all the evidence and said we would not meet with them, and provided extremely racist tweets they made about neighbors. The city cut ties with them as community leaders. With their power to bully gone and having spent what I can only imagine in fines and repairs like they did to numerous other neighbors, after 14 years they sold their house and moved out. Way out to the suburbs where they only have one neighbor about 50 yards away. They knew I was wrapping up my flip and would be out in less than a year. Without being able to bully their neighbors with people having their back, they seemed to have no further reason to stay. Needless to say, I did several more things to wear them down. Finally, when I listed my house, it was sold while theirs was still on the market. As a final FU to them, I reported to the county they had both the new and old house listed as their homestead, meaning they were paying less in property taxes, so they got hit in with more fines on my way out. And guys, even though this was posted under pro revenge, I gotta say what the OP did here comes closer to nuclear revenge if you ask me. Well played. And the last one is titled, "My neighbors let their kids scream like they are being murdered. My service dog does not like it and will bark 3 short alert barks at them, which caused the mother to finally react to the noise." And honestly, I did not stop him. It scares the kid a little bit to hear the dog barking 3 short alert barks like he would if I was having a seizure, but they finally stop screaming once they hear it. These kids will literally scream high pitch like they are having their limbs sawed off. So yeah, when I hear this and my dog hears this, he starts to get visibly concerned. He thinks tiny humans are hurt and I think genuinely wants to make sure they are okay. So I let him oit, he runs to the shared fence, does a few barks till the kids stop screaming, and then he stops and lays down next to the fence. In my opinion, my dog does a better job at moderating the kids than their own mother does. Anyways, this happened again this morning. I don't mind kids playing to preface this. These kids are literally screaming at the top of their lungs, playing like they are hurt dramatically. They started up this morning, my dog does his thing, the kids stop and I hear one starting to cry. Their mom comes over to my house furious. I answer the door politely and ask what is the problem. She says my dog scared her kids and I responded with, "Oh, well, he was concerned. Your children were screaming extremely loud and it sounded like they were hurt. They scream quite often in fact." She gets angrier and basically says they are kids being kids. I say, "No ma'am, I'm a kindergarten teacher and a mother myself. Your kids are being excessively loud to the point where it is concerning the neighbors with their screaming. This level of screaming is indeed not normal for kids, but rather just a behavior you allowed." She got super angry and said they were not screaming that loud, to which I responded, "I can show you my porch ring if you would like. You cannot see your yard, but you can definitely hear the noises your children make." She then threatened to have my dog taken away. He is a seizure alert dog trained by the police academy near here, and I have his actions directly on tape. He simply did 3 short barks, kinda like, "Stop it," and then laid down. Not a threat at all. I told her she could try, but also maybe work on her kids not sounding like they are in a Saw film. She left more angry than she arrived. I went ahead and made a call to the local pound/police dog trainer to let them know in case this lady makes a fall claim against my dog. Thank God for Ring cameras set up everywhere so my husband can monitor my seizures, because I can validate my dog's whereabouts at any time. And guys, unfortunately we have already reached the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed today's stories, and if you haven't already, please also go to patreon.com/ripeyoutube, where I upload exclusive Reddit videos starting at just $3 a month. This is a great way to support me in case you are interested, and the chance for me to become independent from YouTube revenue. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe and like the video, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.